grade 9s, we're finally in the home stretch of equations because we're on our final topic, which is word problems. But I'm afraid I think quite a few of us, our heart starts beating whenever we see a word problem. And I think it's really important for us to do some examples so we can start to realize that these are not nearly as bad as we think they are. They also take quite a bit of practice. So don't forget to write down the examples and the answers and some notes to yourself so that when you study from this, you can make sense of what you were saying. So example number 1 says, if Georgia buys one more pair of shoes, she will then have double the amount of shoes as Ella. At the moment, they have 56 pairs of shoes. Let the number of pairs of shoes that Ella has be X. Now that's really important. Something has to be X. And if the questions are fairly complex like this one, then they generally are quite generous in a test or exam and tell you what to make equal to X. And this question now says determine the number of pairs that Georgia has. So basically there's something going on now. At this very moment in time, Ella has X pairs of shoes. Then it says if Georgia buys one more pair of shoes, she will then. So then, something in the future, what will Georgia have? Georgia will have, that is not the best way to spell Georgia. Sorry, can't write nicely. Georgia will have 2x pairs of shoes. So that's what she will have in the future. So if she gets one more pair of shoes, she will have double the amount of Ella. At the moment, together, Ella and Georgia have 56 pairs of shoes. So I need to know, I'm spelling Georgia wrong again. I need to know how many pairs of shoes Georgia has now so that I can make an equation. Because the whole point is now they have 56 pairs of shoes. So I need to figure out how many pairs of shoes does Georgia have at the moment. Well, if she buys one more pair, she will have 2x. That's if she buys one more pair. So at the moment, she has one less than that. So at the moment, she has 2x minus 1. Because if she gets one more pair, so if I added 1, I'd get to 2x. So now that's the hard part done, because all I need to do now is make an equation. So now I know that Ella plus Georgia, now Georgia's was actually the hard part, gives me 56. So if I add my x's together, I get that. If I add 1 to both sides, I get 57. And if I divide by 3, I get 19. Now that's the number of pairs that Ella has. That wasn't the question. The question was how many pairs does Georgia have? So finally, just make sure that you always answer the question. So Ella has 19 pairs, and Georgia will have, well, there's two ways to work it out. You could say 2 times 19 minus 1, which is 37 pairs, or you could just say 56 take away 19. Now, if I'm checking, 19 plus 37 does equal 56. So my answer is 37. So the hard part here was actually making the equation. So I'm just going to talk through that again. This question says Ella has x. If Georgia bought one more pair, she would have double that. So then Georgia would have 2x. So how many does she have now? She has 1 less than that, which is how I got my 2x minus 1. Then I could make my equation because together those two make 56. Once you've made the equation, you're back to an easy question because equations are something we're good at. Right, let's try another example. The total of 4 consecutive, so what does the word consecutive mean? Consecutive means one after another. So 1, 2, 3, 4 are 4 consecutive numbers. But now these aren't just consecutive numbers, they're consecutive odd numbers. So the total of 4 consecutive odd numbers is 96. What is the third number? Now you might be tempted here to just start guessing, 19 plus 21 plus 23 plus 25, does that equal 96, etc. Now we're going to try not to guess, because ultimately in an exam they'll probably force us to use an equation, and they'll probably ask us a question that we can't guess. So we've got to learn the skill of creating an equation. So we have to first make something equal to x. So let's make the first number equal x. That would make sense. So what will our second number be? Now, really importantly, it isn't just the second number, it's a consecutive odd number. So if 1 was the first odd number, 3 would be the next consecutive odd number. So what were we doing? We were adding 2. So the second number will be x plus 2. Our third number, we would add another 2 to that. So we'll get x plus 4. And our last number, our fourth number, will be x plus 6. Now that's the hard part, because now the question just says the total equals 96. So if I add them together, so if I take x plus 2 plus x plus 4 plus x plus 6, I get 96. So if I do my sum simplifying, I get 4x plus 12 equals 96. If I minus 12 on both sides, I get 84. And so finally, when I divide 84 by 4, I get 21. Now, again, that's not the answer to the question, because the question said, what is my third number? So basically, I have to go back and say, right, my numbers are 21, 23, 25, and 27. And if you go add those together, you can check if you get 96. So what is my third number? The answer is 25. Okay, again, so that wasn't too bad. Okay, let's try another one. Jasmine, Tashawn, and Angela take turns at driving a car from Tashawn's house to Stellenbosch. I hope they don't, because they're far too young to drive. A total of 85 kilometers. If Tashawn drives 5 less than 3 times as much as Jasmine. Okay, so Tashawn drives 5 kilometers less than 3 times Jasmine. And Angela drives twice as far as Tashawn. How many kilometers does Tashawn drive? Okay, well, someone has to be x. So let's just see here. So Tashawn depends on Jasmine, because you've compared the distance to Jasmine. And Angela, you've compared to Tashawn. So Angela depends on Tashawn, and Tashawn depends on Jasmine. So I think it would make sense to make Jasmine equal to x. So Jasmine's distance that she drives, we're going to make that equal to x. Simply because then Tashawn is going to depend on that x, and then Angela is going to depend on that Tashawn. So it's almost like dominoes. So let's actually look at Tashawn now. If Tashawn drives 5 kilometers less than 3 times as Jasmine, so Tashawn's distance, she doesn't quite drive 3 times Jasmine. So 3 times Jasmine would be 3x. She drives 5 kilometers less than 3 times. So 5 kilometers less than. And finally, Angela drives twice as far as Tashawn. So Angela's distance is twice as far as Tashawn. So that's fairly easy. That's 2. And don't forget this bracket, because that whole of 3x minus 5 is Angela. Now, how far does Tashawn drive? I don't really care what the question asks. I need to make an equation. They drive a total of 85 kilometers. So x plus 3x minus 5, so Jasmine plus Tashawn plus Angela will give us 85. Now, this would be considered a very difficult word sum, because it takes a lot to think of. I probably would tell you in a test exam who to make equal to x, but if you don't ever know, always pick the simplest one. And everyone here depended on Jasmine in the end. Also notice that this is a classic example of where guessing would take you forever. And so we need to learn the skill of making an equation, because this example would be probably too complex in order to guess. Okay, I would divide into terms, and I would need to simplify out this term. So I actually get x plus 3x minus 5 plus 6x minus 10 equals 85. So this is a lovely linear equation again. So I actually now get 10x minus 15 is 85. So if I add 15 to both sides, I actually get 100. And if I divide by 10, I get 10 kilometers. Now, was that the question? Well, X represented Jasmine. So now I know that Jasmine is X, and so Jasmine is 10 kilometers, but the question said how far does Tashan drive? So basically I now know that it's 3 times 10, which is 30, minus 5 is 25. So Tashan is 25 kilometers, because that was the question. Right, that was a lovely one. Okay, let's move on. Example number 4. The area of a rectangle is 72. Now let's just remember, what is area? Area of a rectangle is length times breadth. So the length times the breadth of a rectangle is 72 centimeters squared. If the length is 6 centimeters more than the width, determine the width. So basically the width is the thing that everything depends on. So we're going to make the width equal to x, because then our length is 6 centimeters more. Now again, so I'm going to write x plus 6. Again, I could start guessing. I really could here. I can probably guess this answer very quickly. But in a test exam and in the higher grades, I promise you the questions are going to be far too complicated to guess. So we're trying to learn a skill. Okay, now we need to make our equation. Well, it's not too bad, because the area is equal to length times width, or length times breadth. So it's x plus 6 times by x. However, I know my area. My area is 72. So if I multiply this out, this is x squared plus 6x. And what do you know? This is a quadratic equation. So my quadratic equation said one side equal to 0. So I prefer to keep my x squareds positive. So I'm going to keep everything on this side, but I'm going to minus 72 on both sides. So make one side equal to 0. Factorize. So x times x. What are my options for 72? 72 could be, 36 times 2. There's probably lots of options. 12 times 6. Now, because there could be lots of options, try and check as you go which option could give me 6. Now, immediately I look at that, I'm like, that could give me 6. Now, what are my signs like? My signs must be different. But, so one's a plus and one's a minus, but they need to add to give positive 6. So I think it must be positive 12 minus 6. So it's positive 12 minus 6. So almost there. If you have two factors multiplied together to give you 0, either x plus 12 must equal to 0, so x would be equal to negative 12, or x minus 6 would be 0, so x would equal to 6. Now always answer the question. So the question was determine the width. So either the width is negative 12 centimeters or it's 6 centimeters. Now there are two answers to a quadratic equation, so there's no problem with that. But hang on just one moment. This is a practical situation. Can you have a width of negative 12 centimeters? No, that's not possible. And so just be careful when you have quadratic equations with a story sum, like where the x actually means something. Chances are one of the answers actually can't be possible in this context. And when that happens, we just draw a line through that. So therefore, my width here is 6 centimeters. So I'm just going to write myself a note here, and I'm just going to say careful. Sometimes the context means that one of the solutions is not possible. So sometimes the context means that one of the solutions is not possible. And obviously this only really happens in a quadratic, but very often in a quadratic, in a word sum, one of the answers actually is just impossible in the context. If this was just a normal quadratic, then of course both of those answers are acceptable. Okay, last one. Two consecutive numbers. So not odd, not even, just consecutive numbers. So we've practiced this one before. We're going to let the first number be x, and that means the second number, because it's not consecutive odds or consecutive evens, the next number will just be x plus 1. And they multiply together to give you 56. Now again, I can guess the answer right now, but that's not the point. When we get to higher grades, they're not going to be able to be guessed. So let's try and make an equation. That product multiply to give me 56. So I multiply out, I get x squared plus x equals 56. And what do you know? It's another quadratic. So I make one side equal to 0 by minusing 56 on both sides. And I factorize. So this gives me x times x. 56 is, and I'm afraid I've been doing this a long time, so I know it's 8 times 7. But there are lots of other options. But the option that springs to mind is 8 and 7. Because 8 and 7 can give you 1. Now my signs, let me just have a look here. My signs have to be different signs. And I need positive 1 in the middle. So I think I need plus 8 minus 7. So either x is equal to, sorry, x, I should actually, let me retract that. Let me say either x plus 8 must equal 0, or x minus 7 must be 0. So either x is equal to negative 8 or x is equal to 7. Now again, two consecutive numbers multiplied together to give you 56. What are these numbers? Are these both acceptable? If x was equal to negative 8, then the numbers would be negative 8 and the next consecutive number would be negative 7. Now would those multiply together to give you 56? Well, they would. So actually a negative here isn't a problem. Or you could have x as 7, sorry, not x. You could have the two numbers of 7 and 8, which would also work. So not always are negative numbers a problem. They're only a problem if you're meant to be talking about mass or kilometers or time. Whereas here it actually worked out. Okay, now you'll probably notice that actually the quadratic ones here are more easier than the linear ones. So the most important thing is practicing with word sums, and also to keep an open mind. They are not nearly as bad as they appear to be when you first see them. And that's the end of grade 9 equations. Really, really well done.